All right, I don't know exactly where it cut off in the last video. I was still talking, it cut off. But we finished this one. Now remember, for your notebook grades, you need to be writing all these answers down. So we're going to go through several of these. Remember, you can use notes on the AP macro exam. So I want you to write all these. I don't expect you to write the questions, just write the answers down and put the year here. All right, so that's the one we just did. Let's go on to the next one. Now, if you are brave, did we do two of them? Um, I don't know if we did or not. Um, well, we're gonna do this one. Okay. All right. If you're brave, pause the video and try it on your own. Then we'll go over it. Okay. So here we go. 2004. Remember, you're writing the answers down. Federal Reserve buys 5,000 bonds from Clark's Consulting Services, which then deposits the money in a checking account. First Generation Bank. This should sound very familiar as we go through these. You're going to see all they do is variations of the same thing. I'm trying to prepare you for that. As a result of the Federal Reserve's action, what is the change in the money supply if the required reserve ratio is 100%? I've never heard that before, but interesting question. So, in other words, the bank can't loan any money out. If the reserve ratio is 100%, whatever you put in your checking account, they got to keep. However, so you'd probably be tempted to put zero, but the Fed bought T-bills, so they pulled it out of their vault and gave it to someone. So the answer for the first one is $5,000. Okay. All right. If the required reserve ratio is reduced to 10%, calculate the following: the maximum amount that this bank could lend from this deposit. Okay. So the bank got $5,000 in new checking accounts. The reserve ratio is now 10%. They got to keep $50. How much can they loan out? $4,500. Okay. And by the way, make sure you write on your paper BI. I don't know why they use these I's. I think they're Roman numerals. I just wish they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but because you got to write down what question you're answering. So you have A with an answer, then BI, and now BII. The maximum increase in the total money supply from the Federal Reserve's purchase of bonds. Because this was a purchase of T-bills and all this money was new, it's 5,000 times 1 divided by 0.1, which is 10. And so the answer is $50,000. Now remember, if someone had found $5,000 in their pants after taking it out of the washing machine, boy, would I like to do that. And they put that in the bank, the money supply would become 50,000, but then you'd have to subtract that to say how much it went up. But right now, this is all new money, so the answer is $50,000. Now, let's go down to C. If the banks keep some of the deposits as excess reserves, in other words, the banks don't loan all their money out, how will this influence the change in the money supply that was determined in Part B, II? Well, obviously, if the bank doesn't loan it all out, then it doesn't all multiply. So the answer is the money supply would be less than 50,000. Explain that. I don't really know how to do this, but I'll take a shot at it. If the banks don't loan all the money out, then all the money won't multiply, so the number will be smaller. And D is basically the same thing. The public decides to hold some in the form of currency rather than demand deposits. This is what I said on the last one. If the people decide, hey, I want some cash, I'm just going to hold on to it rather than put it in my checking account, it will be the money supply will not expand to the full 50,000. Okay. And explain, if people hold some of the money and don't put it in a checking account, it does not get multiplied. Okay, moving on. Make sure you're writing the year so I can check this when you turn this in. All right, 2009, you should start seeing a pattern here. Assume the reserve requirement, and I'm looking at the answers. I went through and I did these on my own, and then I went and checked the answer key and I missed one because I wasn't paying attention. I do that a lot. Um, I'm one of these ones who, when I do essays, I don't ever want to go back and check my work. And that is like the biggest mistake you could make. You do it and then you go back and check it again, okay, to look for dumb mistakes. And so I made one. Assume the reserve requirement is 20% and the bank holds no excess reserves. There's that phrase again that means they loan every bit out. Nobody's holding on to some of it like in the last question. All right. Assume that Kim deposits $100 of cash from her pocket into her checking account. Be on the lookout for that. So when it goes from cash into checking, M1 has not changed at all. Calculate each of the following. So she takes $100 and puts it in her bank. in her checking account, and the reserve requirement is 20%. What is the maximum amount, maximum dollar amount the commercial bank can initially lend? Well, if she puts $100 in her checking account, they want to loan as much out as they can, but they have to keep 20%, which is $20. So how much can they loan out? $80. What's the maximum total change in demand deposits in the banking system? Well, so she put $100 in, so the banking checking accounts go up $100 and then multiplies time the multiplier. 1 divided by 0.2 is 5. So the answer is $500. What is the maximum change in the money supply? Now here's the trick. That $100 was already in the money supply when it was in her pocket. So when she puts it in the bank, yes, the money supply becomes $500. But how much did it go up? $400. Okay, less than $100. So that was not a change in the money supply. It was already there. All right, now here we go again. Assume the Federal Reserve buys $5 million in government T-bills on the open market. As a result of the open market purchase, calculate the maximum increase in the money supply in the banking system. This is the third time in a row we've seen this. You should expect this. So what they did is the Fed pulled $5 million out of their vaults and they bought T-bills. So that's new money going into the system, and people are going to put it in their checking accounts. That's the theory, and it's going to multiply times 5. So the answer is 25 million. Okay. Given the increase in the money supply in Part B, what happens to real wages in the short run? Now this is tricky, and we haven't gone over this yet. We have 2.5 weeks before your exam. So real wages, that's how much you get paid, minus inflation. So let's say you make $500 a week, but inflation is 20%. Your real wages are $400. Okay, now so let's just think about what happened. This is complicated, and I've noticed that on these essay questions, the further you get down near the bottom, it gets more complicated. So remember, it says given the increase, what happens to real wages? You got a 50-50 shot, or actually a 33-33-33. You can say they go up, they go down, they stay the same. Never leave anything blank. Okay. Most generally, it's either go up or go down. And so you got a 50-50 shot at this. Okay. So let's think this through. If the government puts $5 million out there and it multiplies, it becomes 25 million, the money supply has gone up. If the money supply has gone up, what's happened to the interest rate? It has gone down. Remember, we talked about this just a few minutes ago. As the money supply increases, banks have to lower the interest rate. So interest rates go down, but we're not done. As interest rates go down, house payments and car payments get cheaper. So what's going to happen? People are going to buy more house payments, more houses, and more cars. Aggregate demand is going to shift up. As aggregate demand shifts up, what is going to happen to inflation? Well, if people are buying more, prices are going to start going up. Inflation is going to go up. So the example I just gave you is we had 500, you got paid $500 a week. Inflation was 20%, ridiculously high number, but let's throw it out there. That meant you actually only made 400. Well, now inflation is now 25%. So your real wages have gone down. Okay, I hope you followed all that. As far as explaining, let me see. You would say as the money supply increases, nominal interest goes down, spurring aggregate demand, causing prices to go up. That is complicated, but remember, you can get that first point, half the time just by guessing. I'd rather you not guess, but you got to do what you got to do. All right, 2010 Form B. Only 2 more of these, and we're only going to do the first part of it. The central bank of the country of Sewell sells bonds on the open market. Here we go again, but this time instead of buying, they're selling. Assume that the banks in Sewell have no excess reserves. In other words, they loan everything out. Nobody's holding cash. Nobody's sticking money under their mattress. Nobody's, putting in their pocket to carry around. What is the effect of the central bank's action on the amount of consumer loans that the banks can make? And this is actually really not a very complicated question. There's no math involved. So what happens is if the Fed sells T-bills, they're putting money out there. No, if they buy T-bills, they're putting out money out there. Buy big, sell small. If they're selling T-bills, the money supply is getting smaller. As the money supply gets smaller, then the banks have less money. So the answer is they decrease. the amount of customer loans that banks and Sewell can make decrease. And using a correctly labeled graph of the money market show the effect of the central bank's action on the nominal interest rate. Now remember, you don't have to draw these graphs this year, but I'm just going to show you the answer. And there it is. If they bought T-bills, this would go to the right. Buy big, sell small. Just remember, the money supply has an inverse relationship with the interest rate. If the more money there is, interest rate goes down. Less money there is, interest rates go up. If you have one good basketball player on your team, he's very valuable, or she. If you have 10, they're less valuable individually. And so there's an inverse relationship. And so this is what happens. When they sold T-bills, they took money out of the money supply. And what happens is the money supply decreased, causing interest rates to go up. Okay, one more and then you're on your own. This is a pretty big one here. Sewell Bank, there we go with Sewell again. I'm pretty sure that means that Dr. Sewell is one of the people on the test committee, because whenever you see these names, it's somebody who's on the test committee. There's a little joke they do. Sewell Bank has a simplified balance sheet below. Now, I'm not going to go all over how to do a balance sheet again, but based on Sewell's bank balance sheet, calculate the required reserve ratio. Now, here's how much they remember. There's no savings accounts in this bank. Demand deposits, required reserves are a percentage of demand deposits. And remember, they wrote these so that you could do them in your head. This bank has $2,000 in required reserves. Checking accounts are $10,000. The answer is 20%. Okay. The answer key, when I looked at it, they put 0.2. Same thing. I'd rather you put 20%. Suppose that the Federal Reserve purchases $5,000 worth of bonds from Sewell Bank. So now this is like the one I did with you in class. So here's their T-bills that they own. This bank owns $7,000 worth of T-bills. The Fed buys $5,000 worth of them. So this crosses out. If we were doing this goes from 7,000 minus 5. It goes down to 2,000. Well, the thing's out of balance now, right? Where's the $5,000 go? Into excess reserves. What will be the change in dollar value of each of the following immediately after the purchase? Excess reserves goes up $5,000. That's the answer. Again, and this is just like the one we did in class. Now, what happens to demand deposits? Nobody's even mentioned demand deposits. And remember, balance sheets have to balance. And so what happens is this 5,000 goes up to here, this thing still balances. Nobody's put any money in demand deposits. So demand deposits have no change. The amount is zero. And by the way, guys, do not be afraid of a zero answer on these. There's almost always a zero answer in here somewhere. Calculate the maximum amount that the money supply can change as a result of $5,000 purchase of bonds. So we now know, it doesn't tell you what the reserve ratio is, but the reserve ratio is 20%. So 1 divided by 0.2 is 5. And so the maximum amount of the money supply can change is 5,000 times 5. And the answer is it goes up $25,000. About to run out of time here. When the Federal Reserve purchases bonds, what will happen to the price of bonds in the open market? I'm actually going to have to pause this and go into the third video because I do not want to give you a rushed answer here.